I'm Magnhild Vågslid. I'm a board member in ISPS Norway. I'm here with Olav Johannessen. He is also a board member in ISPS, and he's a former president of ISPS International.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about your connection with ISPS?
Well, that actually goes a long way back. Some of my teachers in psychiatry were members of ISPS or participated in the international conferences early on in 1975, I think, in Oslo, and they brought with them enthusiasm back to our department of psychiatry. And I attended my first international conference in Turin. I think it was in 1987, and I was also a founding member of the ISPS International as a professional organization. And in the year 2000, I was the local organizer of the ISPS International Conference, which took place in Stavanger, Norway. For a couple of periods, I've also been the president, as you say, of the international organization, and I'm still an eager member of the organization and supporter.
You have a long career in the ISPS.
Yeah, it's been a long life. So, yeah.
Yeah. What in your personal or professional life inspired you to work with people experiencing psychosis?
Well, as a young resident in psychiatry, I got patients with a long history of psychosis, and I got patients with a short history, and I noticed that it was much easier to create a kind of rapport with those that had not been ill for so long. And that took me into the early intervention part of psychiatry. And I also noticed that it was, in a way, easier to perform or make the patient participate in a psychotherapeutic oriented therapy. And I also had teachers, supervisors who were very psychodynamically oriented in our community in Stavanger, Norway. We still are. So I think it has something to do with tradition, but also with the interest in the relational part of mental health work and psychiatry. And I'm also interested in epidemiology, and my first scientific work actually was about the occurrence or the incidence of schizophrenia in Norway. And it was a kind of surprise to me that there were so few new cases, since in the hospitals there were a lot of cases with that diagnosis. And then I concentrated on early intervention, and was also the founder of the TIPS project, which tried to reduce the duration of untreated psychosis. So that has been, in a way, a hand in the glove, as we say, the two parts, early intervention and also psychotherapy, providing psychotherapy for people with this crisis in their life that we call psychosis.
You're a huge role model for the psychosis in Norway, in the field. You have a name that everybody knows about. Well, at least in my hospital, you're a huge name. Mm-hmm. And also in the conference in ISPS Norway we have each year, you are also a celebrity, I will think.
Well,
what do you regard as important changes in psychological and social approaches to psychosis during the last 15 years in Norway?
Well, I think I would go back to the beginning of the 1980s when I was, as I said, a young resident. And I got patients with a long history and a short history. But most of the patients had a very long history, and we had no plan usually for the long-term follow-up of people with a debut psychosis in a way. So what strikes me now when I work in a outpatient unit for young adolescents with psychosis or high risk for psychosis cases, I see patients that we didn't meet in the early 1980s. I work with 15, 16, 17-year-old people with psychosis, and it strikes me every day that this is another world that we experienced in the 1980s. And the people coming into mental health work now in psychiatry, they meet another logic when it comes to understanding serious mental disorders as psychosis, because we now consider at last these disorders as stress disorders and not as brain diseases in a way. There's been a huge development the last 10 years when it comes to understanding the background of this mental breakdown that we call psychosis. So I think that has been the major achievement the last 10 years, and only the last 5 years we have learned a lot about the role of the immune system as a response to what happens in your life. And we have learned that this mental breakdown, psychosis, is in a way an answer to what happens in your life. It's not something that happens in your brain a priori, or what you should say.
Yeah. What do you regard as important changes within ISPS?
Well, I think it has broadened the perspective since the start in 1956 or something. There has been a more social psychiatric point of view coming in stronger. The user perspective and the user power has also increased within the organization and in the mental health world, in the mental health hospitals and outpatient units and so on. ISPS International has been a force all its life for promoting and secure the place and the room for psychological oriented approaches for psychosis. And it has been a kind of counterforce to the traditions that tend to look at psychosis as a kind of biological disease. And the pendulum has in a way turned the last 15 years, I would say. So there's a momentum now for psychological understanding and approaches to psychosis. But it's in a way back to the future, or how you should say it, because in the 50s you had a strong movement that tried to understand and treat people with psychosis with psychological approaches. That disappeared gradually in the end of the 70s and beginning of 80s, up in the 90s, especially in the US. But again, together the two movements, the early intervention movement and this ISPS ideology, I think we are about to, if you could put it like that, win the battle in a way to establish a firm understanding of these disorders as the inner is in a way an imprint of what happened in your life.
Interesting. In your opinion, what should be the key role and the key objects for ISPS in the future?
Well, I think ISPS is going in the right direction actually, because we try to be a place for both users, for different professional groups as psychologists, nurses, art therapists, doctors, and so on. And I think that mixture is important because this ideology, these therapies, they must be rooted in all those professions, so to speak. And the nurse role, milieu therapy, and the individual psychotherapy must be complementary and based on the same ideology. So gradually the ISPS has developed from being a pure psychoanalytical oriented organization to a broader church, so to speak. I think that has been a good thing. Only thing I would argue against that, it must not be too broad so that you lose these psychodynamically based or also cognitive, but the therapeutic point of view in this process. So it, yeah.
Do you think it's going to be too broad, like it is now, developing now?
No, I think it's fine as it is now, but we must not lose the professional perspective on this. We are not the users organizations only, and we are not an anti-pharmaca organization either. We are a pro-psychological minded therapies organization.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jan Olav.
Thank you, Magnhild. Thank you.
I look forward to learn more from you in the future and from ISPS as well. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.